prepared recently top 10 risk, and we are going to prepare also analysis of 40 cities of Central Asia and Caucasus. And as a research company, we'd like to know main ideas or recommendations for the global community.
It's important to note that even when people speak about economy, including the economists, including the international economic organizations, they signal that the most serious risks are not strictly economic or financial, they are geopolitical, and they are related to uncertainty. An example, these trade tensions between the United States and China are affecting not only trade, but are affecting the overall sentiment of investment and even consumers. So that's why I think the most important issue is to address the problem of uncertainty. How to manage uncertainty? First of all, I think that we are already used, and I think we are going to be in the future used to deal with uncertainty. We have to get used to it.
Yeah.
Having said that, it makes sense that we try to be more focused on rules and institutions. I may be biased, I certainly am. As you know, I'm European. I was leading the European Commission for 10 years,
actually.
and that's our way of doing things. It will be impossible among 28 countries to deal every day, because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of regulations. The European law is implemented directly in our countries. So we are a real integrated entity in economic terms. It will be impossible without having common rules and common institutions and a common law. So European community law. So I think the international community, it would be wise. Of course, I'm not suggesting that everybody follows the European model. I'm just saying that there are good reasons for inspiration in the model in terms of rules and institutions, multilateral institutions. So that will be my recommendation, to avoid the uncertainty of just unilateral behavior. Because if not what happens, there is a political change in a major country, and that can have a very important impact. So, commitment to multilateralism, I think, will be my first issue.
The second one, you said common rules and common institutions.
Common institutions, but you are asking me about the solutions or about the problems? For
solutions.
both? There is another point, but it's a more political point, about the culture globally. A culture of peace. When I had the honor to receive the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the European Union, I quoted Spinoza. Spinoza was one of the greatest minds ever in mankind. And he said, peace is not just absence of war. It's a state of mind. It's a spirit of benevolence. So I think it's important, now that we have the social media that is used most of the time for aggression and insults and the so-called fake news, to use that social media, why not, for good, for promoting this culture of peace and understanding. So the civil society to come up and to tell leaders.
Yeah, maybe this is one of the steps we would like to do.
Why not? Why not? Can appear too visionary, but I think it's not unrealistic. I believe some things that today appears unrealistic, tomorrow can be realistic. The civil society of our countries that today is living through very anxious times. There is a lot of anxiety because of climate change, because of technological disruption, because of the growing inequalities, also because of nuclear proliferation, and also because of globalization. To be frank, globalization has created anxiety in the so-called man or woman in the streets about who controls that. And so when there is these movements that are cross-border, the natural tendency is for people to close, becoming more nationalistic, becoming more protectionist, sometimes became more nativist, so looking at foreigners with mistrust. So I think sometimes even xenophobic. So I think the way to fight these negative, in my view, very negative feelings of protectionism, nationalism, chauvinism, nativism, is also to win the debate politically and to promote a culture of openness that now to consolidate the independence of Kazakhstan. President Nazarbayev has been a great visionary and very intelligent. So, in fact, he has put Kazakhstan in a position of promoting peace, of a bridge that today is very much respected in the world. So, I think that was a very intelligent way of consolidating the identity of Kazakhstan, what I call the diplomatic identity, the personality of a country. Sometimes I compare countries with people.
So can it transfer to the Central Asian identity?
And that will be my point. I think it's very important to create and establish and reinforce the Central Asia community. Because the reality is that when you look at the Central Asia through these 5 countries mainly, I'm now focused on these 5 countries that were former Soviet Union countries. The reality is that in terms of regional integration, it's very weak in economic terms and even in terms of movement of people. So I think that could be, okay, we can look at Greater Eurasia, but we should start, and that was one also of the message of the European Union, step by step. Here, 5 countries that have so much in common. It makes sense, regional integration, which, with all the respect for other mechanisms of regional integration that are existing in the region, but these 5 countries, I think it makes sense from an economic, even technical point of view, and politically certainly, to deepen their integration with common standards, with common rules, with common institutions. Basically, my point, and that will create also more conditions to attract investment, because then we benefit from dimension. We have a more favorable environment for business. That is important. I've been in touch with the European investments here in Kazakhstan. They are very important. The European Union is by far the biggest investor in Kazakhstan, but they all tell me that they will prefer to, of course, use Kazakhstan, but for a wider region, because that gives economies of scale that are very important. And in global competition today, you have big guys. You have the United States, you have China, we have Europe, European Union as trade blocks, and economic, and also other important like Japan, India is now growing. So you have these big guys. I mean, the European countries, even the biggest economies like China, Germany, are not in the same level of the United States or China. That's why we are together, and now we are around 500 million people, and in trade terms, the most important bloc in the world, if you count merchandise and services. So my advice to a country like Kazakhstan is to be bigger, and of course be bigger today means working through regional integration, and that's, I think, possible.
Thank you very much for your time.